So, throughout your lives, you are an aggregate of the experiences that you have. And my wife and I, we've been married nearly a quarter century.
Wow.
We have 6 kids, and we've been through some ups and downs, as any family has, right? We have personal experiences, and then we have shared experiences. But in our house, we have one of the things that, to me, is one of my most prized possessions, and it's called our faith wall. And in our faith wall, we have reminders of our faith, right? What has got us to be who we are, and be able to testify, and in dark times that we look at that faith wall, and it really is an anchor for us to think back on times that or experiences that have cemented our faith. So on our faith wall, we have a framed picture of some rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And at the bottom of that picture, there's just a small little plaque that says 254 feet. That's all it says. But what that picture or piece of art actually reminds me of is an experience that we had that we affectionately call our well story. So I was a builder and a developer in Cache Valley, Utah, and for about 6 years. And I had purchased a piece of property from a gentleman, and I was going to develop it out. And I had named it The Acres. I was really excited about this particular piece of property. I developed it into 5 building lots, and then proceeded to build a home on one of the larger lots that I was going to enter into the parade of homes. And as a young builder, I was pretty excited about what this house could mean for a career. And we started building the house. We got it submitted. We won a bunch of awards that year for our home. It was a gorgeous home. I mean, prettier than we had ever lived in. But for whatever reason, I couldn't sell the home. And so we talked about it, and we thought, let's go ahead and let's move into it. And so we moved in, and one of the things that we didn't realize is that the water on the well was bad.
We moved in that night, and we set out all the beds, got all the kids in the beds, and then someone said, I need to use the bathroom. So we went in and started turning on water and flushing toilets, and it was black. It was mud coming out of every faucet, every single faucet. And I said, honey, I think something's wrong.
So I inquired of my neighbor who I had built his home, and his water on his property was gorgeous. His well, it was beautiful. And I'm like, hey, I've never had a well like this. What's the situation? Why is the water brown? It really is. It looked like hot chocolate. Yeah, it looked like hot chocolate. And he says, oh, just run the water. Just run it for a few hours. It should clear up. It's just all the silt and stuff in the pipes. And oh, that's easy fix. So we just turned the water on and kept moving in. And I think we ran it for 2 days.
Yeah.
2 days straight. Every tub, every faucet, everything. And the water never cleared up. And it started to be a little concerning.
Yeah.
So we were listening to an ad on the radio where someone said they could clean it. And guaranteed. I thought, okay, great. Come on out. And I remember specifically the ad says, if we can't clear your water up, then we won't charge you. I'm like, man, that's great news, because we were out of money. Meanwhile, part of the story is, as I was traveling 5 days a week, I lived in the Hilton in some random city in the U.S. And my sweet wife was at the time, I think, pregnant with our 6th child and living in a home with no usable water. So this gentleman's offer that we could fix this, if we can't fix your water, we won't charge you, was a real blessing for us. So I continued to travel, and he showed up, and he started building what I can only describe as that game Mousetrap.
Mousetrap.
It just was every contraption, pipe and filter and big container. And we turned one of our entire bedrooms in the basement, an unfinished bedroom in the basement, into what looked like a giant mousetrap game.
We became great friends. Like, he was there so much that I was like, want some dinner? I'd take dinner down to him, and he would just add another part to this puzzle. And pretty soon, what was supposed to be a bedroom became this giant maze of pipes and
Filters.
huge, those big drums that were filled with water. And I just kept thinking, this is like, and every day was the same story. We're working on it. One day, I remember him turning on the water, and he filled the cup, and he's like, look, it doesn't look like hot chocolate anymore. It's tea. And I'm like, I don't care. Nobody wants tea. Nobody wants tea. We want clear, beautiful water. How long is this going to take? And what turned into be a week or two turned into be 3 months later, 3.5 months later. And what people don't understand is that, you take for granted that water just comes out of a faucet, right? That you can clean, that you can drink, that you can do laundry, that you can wash hair, that you can do all these things. And so he was at the Hilton, and he'd come home on the weekends, and I had to be really careful not to be angry with him and still love him. And he's got soap and hot water, and I've got hot chocolate, and I'm bathing these little children and washing their hair, and you can't even comb through their hair because it's just the silica. Is it the
Silica.
The silica that's in it. And I had to gather all these babies, a set of twins, and all these children, and take them to the laundromat. Need I say more? Like 5 children in a laundromat is my own personal nightmare. And it was every day like that. And we couldn't clean, and I was totally alone, sick. I think I had morning sickness. So I was just a disaster. And he'd come home, he's like, how's it going? And I'm like, it's not going well. He had some fiery darts he had to
contend with. It was touch and go. So we proceeded. We were to the point where he didn't feel like he could do anything else.
Right.
Like he had exhausted all of his options, all of his different filters, all of his different chemicals. And meanwhile, we had no water still. And this was an almost 3-month process.
Right. And during that process, the only place I could receive any comfort was on my knees. I couldn't fix it. Nobody could fix it. So I just would go to my knees, and I'd open up my scriptures and I would read. And I remember reading over and over again, be patient in thine afflictions, that I was supposed to be patient. And I'd literally run out of patience. It was 3.5 months. He wasn't there. I was alone with these children. And I kept saying, Heavenly Father, it's just water. I don't want $1 million. I don't need much, but why can't you make this happen for me? Why can you not answer this prayer? And I felt frustrated. I wish that when I tell this story, I hope people understand I had some really great moments. I also had some really down moments where I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I don't understand why you're not answering this prayer. And it was frustrating. And I felt a little bit of guilt that, what was I doing that I couldn't get this answer? And so one day, we just continued to pray. We just kept trying to figure out what we could do. And one day, a friend of mine came up to me and she said, I know what you're supposed to do. When I shared with her my story, I'm like, I've never even lived on land. And what is this stuff with this well? And I don't know what to do. And she said, you need to hire a well witcher. And I'm like, a well what? What is this? A well what? And she says, this guy, he comes out and he knows exactly where your water is, where you can find water. And I'm like, so I go to Rob and I'm like, we're supposed to hire a well witcher. Do you know what this is?
To get to that point, we had to make the decision that we were actually going to drill another well. Because that was the decision point we were at. We were out of money. The existing well was not good. There was nothing we could do to fix it. Bless the patience of the gentleman who came up and tried to clear the water. I mean, he was an angel, but unfortunately, we couldn't get to a clear water. So I had to have the unfortunate conversation of, I need you to just pull all your stuff out. I mean, this isn't going to work. We've got to figure out another way. And we did not have the money to drill a new well, and there was no guarantee that if we did drill a new well, it would be any different result. So we were in that quandary of, we don't know what direction to go. Heavenly Father, we don't have the money to drill a well. Unless it's clean water, then I can somehow work it out into the long-term financing of the home. So we decided that we would drill a new well, and this is where the well witcher comes in. So I remember you were peering out the window with the kids, watching me walk 9 acres with this gentleman, and he was holding 2 sticks, 2 rods. And I'd never experienced a well witcher either, and it seemed a bit hocus pocus to me, but he was pretty confident and pretty convincing, and it was only $100. So we walked the property, and he's got these 2 rods, and they're bouncing periodically, and he was, you got to explain to me what's going on. So he's like, well, and I'm paraphrasing, so I apologize to all well witchers that are watching this, but it was supposed to bounce for every foot that the water was beneath the surface. Something along those lines. Anyway, so we walk the property, and he tells me that this spot right here is going to be the best spot. And he says, I can only claim the amount of water. I cannot tell you whether or not the water is good or not, or potable. I don't know if it's going to be the same garbage water you got in that well. It turned out to be 31 feet away from the old well. So we had a bit of anxiety about the fact that this could probably be in the same aquifer and have the same issue. But at the same time, he didn't find a solid amount of water anywhere else on the property. So this was our option. So it started to bounce a lot right here. Give me the numbers, give me the stats, right? So he says, at 77 feet, you've got a little bit of water. But at 117 feet, you've got a full-on aquifer, a lot of water. I'm like, that sounds great. And he says, traditionally, with a lot of water, it's usually clean. So I'm like, all right. So I go to her and say, we're going to have to gamble it because we can't survive on the existing water. So I hire a well guy who comes out, and I said, this is the spot. I said, that's where the hole goes. Start drilling me a well right here. And I think at the time it was $28 a foot. And I'm thinking, okay, 70 feet, there's going to be a little bit of water, but usually above 100, you don't want to do a potable well above 100 feet. You want it to be a little deeper. So I'm like, okay, 117 feet. I can survive that. 117 feet times $28. Let's do it. And so he starts to drill. I go to the Hilton, right? I was on the road. I start to travel, and he starts to drill. And I don't remember how long it took him to drill, but I remember periodically just checking in with him. How deep are we? What's it look like? And I remember the first report, he said, I'm at 100 feet, and there was nothing at 77 feet. There was not even a drip. I'm like, wow, that's a little disconcerting. I'm like, I said, but what's it look like? And he says, it's clay. It's like a same kind of a silica clay that I would expect, or that I had seen the whole way down. I said, well, keep going, and I'll call you back and report back if you hit anything. I'm really curious around the 117 foot mark. So remember, he gets to 150, 160, 180. He gets to 200 feet, and there is not one drip of water, not a single moisture. The clay was just dry as a bone the whole way down to 200 feet. And at this point, I just said, stop drilling. I'll be home in a day or two. I'll call you back. And I remember going out there and looking at this ring of just dust, basically. And then I remember just staring at it, and that's when you came out.
So the anticipation of waiting for this man to drill this hole, and I honestly believed that Heavenly Father was going to answer this prayer. I thought, this is it. This is where he's stretched it so much. He's refined us. He's not answered, but this is it. This is going to be my answer. And so I remember being you were on the phone, and we're driving. This started in May. It's now September. Our kids are going back to school. We're doing school shopping. I'm anticipating that I'm going to have water to bathe my children and to take care of my home. This is it. So driving home from Layton, Utah, and to get a phone call, and he says, it's dry. It was baffling. It was so disappointing that, again, I felt like, wow, what do we have to do to get this answer? So we walked out to this field, this hole. And, when I tell this story, I ask people not to judge me. And I think people understand, and I hope that they would, but unless you've lived without water, you just don't get it. You just won't get it. But just try to understand that I was probably not in the best place, and this was not my bright and shiny moment, and that's okay, because all of us have those moments that we're not at our best. And I thank my Heavenly Father that I had a husband who was at his best. But I'm not sorry to say, I went out to the hole, I looked at my husband, and I said, that part in the Book of Mormon? That part when Lehi took his family out to the wilderness to perish, I said, this is what it feels like. And I said it with a louder voice than that probably. And he knows me really well. And if you can just make me laugh, then everything goes away. And so he tried. He did his very best. And he looked at me and he said, well, you better be careful or you're going to get struck by lightning. And I think I...
As very somber as she could, she looked at me and she said...
No, I get to say it. I said, then strike me where the water runs clear. And then I ran inside before Heavenly Father could make good on that offer. And I remember walking, I went right into my room and I threw myself down in my closet and I said another prayer and I just said, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I know, because I have enough experience in my life, I know you can do anything. And I don't know when you're going to answer this prayer, but I'm sorry that I'm not patient. And I felt the Spirit so strongly. And the reason I love that is because we don't always have to be perfect. We don't always have to do everything right. We don't always have to have those feelings and, feel like we're on the top of the mountain and have so much faith. And that's really not what this life is about. It's those moments when we're not at our best. They're Peter moments, when you're sinking in the water and Jesus Christ reaches his hand out and he pulls you up. That is what I felt in that closet. And I felt so confident that I was loved, even though I wasn't at my best. And so that's what I was experiencing in the closet. But when I was in the closet, my husband went out to the field and got on his knees.
So I remember kneeling down, and it was about 4 feet of weeds. And it was so hot, I think it was 90-something that day. And I remember saying a prayer and just saying, Heavenly Father, I'm at my wit's end. I don't know. My wife deserves water. Our whole financial existence is tied up into this home. If this does not have water, I won't be able to sell the home. We won't be able to move into it. It'll be a disaster for us. And I remember just saying, I need to know what to do. I need an answer as to what direction to go. I can't go any deeper. I'm already at 200 feet in this well. I can't go any deeper if it's going to not yield some result, some positive result. I've got to cut my losses. But then I don't know what to do. And at that moment, there was no good option that I could come up with. And I was blessed enough that Heavenly Father said, he gave me the confidence that he knew the answer. And as I was kneeling in this 90-whatever degree heat in 4 feet of weeds out in a field, I heard what I thought my neighbor behind me say, 54 more feet. And that's all I heard. And I remember opening my eyes, looking behind me to see if my neighbor, Steve Kimball, had walked up behind me. Because it was an audible 54 more feet. It wasn't loud. It was just very discernible that it was 54 more feet. And I remember opening my eyes and looking back to see if Steve was there. And I could see the dust just floating in the weeds amongst where I was kneeling. And when I noticed that Steve wasn't there, I just got this peace that was our answer. So I got up and I walked in, and Tamara was in the bedroom, and I said, remember the story where the brother of Jared exercised just a great deal of faith? And I sat down and I started to talk to her about that story. And I said, we're going to exercise faith. And then I told her the experience. I said, so I'm going to call the well driller, and I'm going to request that he goes down 54 more feet. And I remember the call with him. And when I called him, I said, hey, I need you to come back. I need you to go 54 more feet. And he said, well, a pipe is it's 20 feet long, so I'll just go down 3 more pipes. I'll go down 60 feet. And I remember very distinctly, and bless his heart for being patient with me, I said, this is $28 a foot. If you want to get paid for any of the 200 feet plus the 54, you will go down 54 feet and you will call me If you go down 56 feet, I'm not going to pay you for the well. I need you to call me at 54 feet. Do we understand each other? He said, you got it. So he went out and he marked one of the pipes 6 feet down, because 2 pipes plus the remaining footage would be exactly 54 feet. And he says, I won't go past this mark. I'll go till this mark hits the ground, and I'll call you, regardless of the outcome.
All day long, in anticipation, we just watched this driller. We watched him drill. We were so eager to see what would happen. And I remember the day feeling so long because he drilled into the day. And when it almost got dark, it was almost dark, there was a knock at the door. And we opened the door, and there he was standing there, and he had this look on his face. And I couldn't tell if he found water, if he didn't find water, but he had his hand behind his back. And he said to me, do you want to see your water? And I said, yes. And he pulls his hand out, and I remember him holding this mason jar in his hands. And it was the most beautiful water I have still ever seen today. It was so clear, so beautiful. I hadn't seen water like that in 3 months. It was amazing. And he looked at me and he smiled, and I was so excited. We all screamed. The kids screamed. I grabbed him. I think I kissed him. I can't remember, but I was just so excited. We screamed. We were cheering, and then I remember saying thank you, and I was almost caught up in the moment that I almost forgot to ask the most important question. And before I could shut the door, I opened it again, and I said, wait a second. I forgot to ask you, how far down did you go? And he looked me in the eye, and he said, I went down 54 feet. And so I remember feeling just this, I can't even express, I think I was almost in shock. I was like, I cannot believe it. I cannot believe, yet I can, because Rob had received that confirmation in the field. And I remember gathering my children, and we knelt down and we prayed, and we said thank you for this simple prayer. To so many, it would seem like such a simple thing, water, but yet it has shaped our lives in a way that is unimaginable, right? Because we feel like we know that Heavenly Father's aware of us. And so
no matter what trials we experience, it really is irrelevant what the trial is. We know we're not alone. It doesn't matter what it is. We know we're not alone. Because why would we not be alone on something as simple as water and then be left alone through disease or divorce or death or any of the other major trials that we go through in life? So we're very confident that those rocks, which you did for me on Father's Day or Christmas the next year. For Christmas the next year, she, because when I got home from my trip that week, I walked out to the well site, and the well guy had already capped and done all of his stuff, but there was a ring of peppercorn gravel around the pipe from the water pressure, and he popped the top of that aquifer at 254 feet. He had to go through it just enough that, and he, as he was explaining it to me, the pressure was so much that it pushed water up 254 plus whatever was sticking above the ground, so probably 256 feet of actual pipe. The water pressure, when he popped that aquifer, it shot rock, not just water, but rock out of that aquifer down in the hole, out the top of that, so much so that there was a ring about this tall of peppercorn gravel in this perfect donut shape around the well. And I remember as he was explaining that he was watching the red line that he had made on the pipe. And as he was pounding it down and the pipe was getting closer and closer, he was watching that red line. And as soon as it hit the surface of the dirt, it popped and that water shot out the top of and at the time it was still 6 feet above. So it actually had to push 254 plus, it had to push 260 to get the water and the rock out the top, and then he cut it off and capped it. But that, I just remember looking at the peppercorn gravel ring there and thinking, what a blessing, what that represented to me. What a foundational cementing of my faith, that I knew prayers were answered. And I took a small Tupperware and scooped up that gravel. put a lid on it, and just wrote, I think I just wrote faith on the lid. And I put it away. And then
for Christmas, because he's very sentimental, but for Christmas, I decided to do something with that so that we could remember, because of this experience, now for me, I don't know about you, but that's what I go back to. So I can wait, because I know, even if it takes 3 months or 3 years or 30 years, I know he'll answer. I know it. And it'll be in his time and in his own way. And I also know I don't have to be perfect. I know I'll have my ups and downs. I know I'm going to struggle, but I know he'll never leave. He'll never leave. He'll never tire, that his mercy is real and that he will answer the prayer. And so I wanted us to remember as a family. So I grabbed these rocks, this pea gravel, is that what it's called? Peppercorn gravel. And I took it to someone who frames things. I'm like, what can you do for me? She's just like, rocks? And then we came up with this really cool design that it's such a cool design. It kind of travels up to the sky in a kind of an S shape. And then at the bottom, there's a little plaque that says 254. And we put that up on this wall so that when we walk past it, when our children walk past it, when people walk past it, they're like, what's this? And we're like, well, let us tell you. This is a great story. And we're able to remind ourselves that our Heavenly Father is real, that he answers us, that he knows us, and that really in the waiting time is when all the good stuff happens, by the way. It's that 3 months that all the growth, all that refinement, all the good stuff happens that makes us who we are. When they came up to test the water, they said it was, this is your part.
Yeah, so there's no filter. When we actually put the water into the home, we pumped it direct from the well. No filter, no anything, and it had an immense amount of water pressure, which was one of the best wells in the south end of the valley. And the fact that there was zero filter, we called it God's water.
The Lord's, God's water. It's the Lord's water.
So I just remember every time I drank a glass of that water, it was just
the Lord's water.
It was a reminder. But back to the piece of art that she gave me on Christmas. It's a physical representation of a very spiritual moment. And no one can ever take the spiritual feelings and the confirmation from us. No one. No matter what anybody says, it's irrelevant what they say. We know what we experienced. And that that spiritual representation is with us for eternity. But that very sentimental, very beautiful outward expression of that moment hangs on a wall that we call our faith wall. And I love looking at it every day.
Yeah.